ain't going back. Not gonna buy into all that. Hey, hey, ain't gonna hide. Gonna let all the fears slide. Got Mother Nature is on my side. Got all of the loving growing inside.
Hello, everyone. Welcome once again to the New Now. It's been a while since I've done a solo cast, and I've decided the new year to cover some topics that are out of the box, a bit hard to approach. And it seemed to me in this way it must be, or it could be better for me to do this by myself. So today we're going to go over the topic of feelings and emotions. Okay, this is going to be a series on phantom work, what may be missing from your life. You know, we've heard all kinds of people talk about shadow work and work on your dark side and work on the fears that you have hiding, or work on the bad things that happened to you in your life when you were little, when you were small. But in this case, we're going to work on imagining and exploring and deciding for ourselves what could be missing from our life, in that it is something, if you think about having phantom pains, or people that have lost a limb, or so I've heard, or people that have lost, something in their life, like let's say a significant other, and the pain lingers on. It may not be there, but the feeling is real. So in other words, people find they have itches if they're missing, let's say, they've lost a hand or some other body part, so to speak. And when their eyes are closed and they are sitting alone, they will still feel that missing something or other, a limb. So phantom work. What are you missing from your life? So let's go back and look at my life a little bit. Ever since I was small, ever since I was a little boy, I always knew something was missing. Right? I could sit in my room at night when I was, 7, 8, 9, 10, where all the other children, let's say, were out playing and having the kind of life that they were having, sports and eventually chasing ladies and eventually chasing money. I mean, I tried all of those in little ways, but it always seemed to me something was missing. Like, how was my life supposed to proceed? How was I supposed to grow? What was I supposed to do? I mean, the options that were available to us at the time, whether it was, to grow up and become a salaryman, to work for some money, or to get a vocation, to become a plumber or an electrician, to get a professional so-called suit job of lawyer or politician or accountant, what have you. Take your pick, doctor, dentist, the usual gamut that was offered when I was growing up anyways, is a ways that you can become comfortable, make some money, have a salary, and get on with your life. This was something that was pushed on me my whole life. My parents said, get a job, get an education, make some money, you'll be happy. But, not a friend of mine, but someone I've read and quoted lots, Vernon Howard, said, you should never take advice from anybody that's not happy. And since my parents never seemed happy and they kept giving me this advice, along the way, teachers and friends and other adults and, eventually older cohorts and bosses when I was working in the salary world, none of them seemed authentically happy. So taking advice from someone that didn't seem happy as to how to have a good life seemed a little asinine. In fact, seemed very asinine to me. And so I always sat back and looked and was wondering what was missing from my life. When I was small and I would go out and play, or I'd run in the woods, or even I would sit in my bed at night and dream, there always seemed to me a leaking, so to speak, of another life, another way, another potential, another gamut of available options that were not being shared with me. I looked at religions, and then I looked at alternative religions, and then I looked at all the religions. I looked at the Jewish religion, the Christian religion, the Muslim religion. I've looked at the Buddhists, of course, and all of the monks, et cetera, et cetera. I live in Japan, and I've looked at the Shinto religion, which to me is as close as maybe you can come. And that looking at the spirits of things, the spirits of trees, the spirits of water. I mean, I guess the natives have said there's a spirit in everything. And so I wondered, right? I wondered as I sat with my imagination, why is the only option to work, to make some savings, to listen to some obvious fools in suits that called themselves politicians or leaders? And you could tell even when I was 7 or 8, or the religious, so-called religious leaders, that they didn't have your best interest at heart. Right? They were not sharing something that would allow you, in my opinion, to become a happy being. I mean, if you look at it, and I did at the time, I used to imagine myself dead. Strange little boy I was in some ways. So I would say, what does it feel like to not be here anymore? And I would give myself some jolts, right? I would give myself some shocks as to how that felt. It's like, okay, I'm not here. What does it mean when I don't exist? What happens to my personality, right? What happens to my life? What happens to what I've created? And, I have to say, even as I looked around and I saw other children of my age and then teenagers, and their parents were giving them, let's say, cars or money or jobs. I used to dream or wish I had parents that had a business they could pass along to me, right? Or my parents weren't very wealthy at all, or had money they could pass along to me. You could drive when you were 16, when I was growing up at high school in Toronto, and I would see other kids my age, 16, 17, that got sports cars. And I envied them in some ways, but then when I looked in their eyes or I tried interacting with them or chatting with them, it seemed very monstrous. They seemed very selfish, obviously. They seemed, you don't want to say psychopathic, but if you want to look at it as someone that's only concerned with themselves, I could say everyone, including myself at times, was psychopathic, whether I was born that way or I learned to be that. Really, if you're just thinking of yourself and not the world around you, and you're only thinking of short-term gratification, then, you're acting, in my opinion, in some psychopathic ways. And that seemed like a dead end, quite literally. I go, okay, you save some money, then what? You get old and you get sick, and then what? You have a life, you make some children, let's say, and then what? I wasn't a grateful child, no doubt about it. I saw, how my siblings were, I saw how other siblings were, and I'm going, well, what do you do? Right? You get married, you make some children, you save some money, you get older, you get fatter for the most part, you get tired, you slow down. What do you have at the end? Like, what are you holding on to? Like, the religions did not offer anything in a way that allowed me to see that there was comfort on the other side. I mean, every religion, if you look at them at their core, basically says, don't worry about it now, something better's coming. Right? Don't worry about it now, heaven's coming. Don't worry about it now, you'll be reincarnated in a better life. Don't worry about it now, God or spirit or Buddha or Muhammad is going to gift you with, 72 virgins, 86, ham sandwiches, and in a soft cloud to sit in after you're gone. But to me, that never made any sense. I never thought that we came here to wait for a better life. Like, why are we here? Why did we land in this dream? Why did we decide, which I still feel we chose our parents? Why did we come here into these bodies to have this life? And I don't think it was to get better for the next one. I don't think it was to have a hard time so that you can, get your rewards in heaven later on. To me, it always seemed like now was the time to be alive. Now was the time to learn what you needed to learn. And now was the time to figure out what was missing. In other words, what phantom pains did I have in my life? I have my limbs. I never really hurt myself badly. I've been very lucky in that way. So I was never missing any body parts, so to speak. And yet it still felt like a huge part of me was missing. Like my imagination, my dreaming, my ideas of what could come. I would watch myself as I grew up. I could see how I was different from everyone else. And I can remember when I hit, puberty, and then when a few years beyond, and I decided in my own mind at the time that I saw when I wanted to chase ladies that only assholes, and this is me talking to me, got ladies, right? I watched the men in high school, and then I watched some of the guys in university, and I watched the ladies that were interacting with them. It always seemed the people that were mean and selfish and self-concerned ended up doing better in the dating game than humble, laughing, less than socially adept people such as myself. Right? I was horrible in the social game. I never had one date in high school. I never had one date in university. I barely talked to anyone in a couple of years I went to university. I quit to run a manga or a comic book store at the time because all I could think of was I needed to have my imagination. So for me, let's say back in my early 20s, late teenagers, what seemed like the phantom pain of missing was my imagination. Because anything that had an ideal that was higher than I was living at the time seemed to attract me, whether it was aliens at the time or UFOs, alternative history, as a lot of people look at right now, ancient civilizations, different ways to be alive, different sort of utopia, so to speak, different sort of ways that we could have a life beyond the grudge and grind and grime that most people went through. Even if they had lots of money, you still have to grudge and grind and grime your way up. I became a stockbroker in my 20s. I spent 10 years in that industry, and there was a lot of money, no doubt. There was a lot of eating, drinking, alcohol, drugs, ladies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, parties, unending almost. It was kind of in the 80s when there was a lot of economic so-called abundance going on. In other words, you can indulge a lot with cars and food and money and ladies and trips and fancy clothes, what have you, but it still seemed grimy, still seemed dirty, still seemed unsatisfying. Like, why were these people drinking so much? Why were they eating so much? Why were they doing so many intoxicants of all kinds if they were truly happy? And I was lucky during those years to, come across a few psychedelic journeys. We've done some videos on how dangerous they could be, sure. But at the time, I would say some of the things such as mushrooms or mescaline, I came across a whole bunch of different things, seem to be of service in a way, right? That was my path because, I grew up as, let's say, a narrow-minded, selfish, closed, ideal person, in that my upbringing at the time didn't give me any alternatives, right? I was raised on TV. I was raised on sugar cereals. I was raised on middle-class people with very limited, narrow-minded values on life. Not that they were mean, but they were kind of, get a job, get married. Doesn't matter, you have a mortgage, have some grandkids, and don't worry about the rest. Your religion's going to look after you, right? And I always thought that was a pooey way to look at things, because again, they were not happy. So I didn't see myself as being happy. And then when I did some of the mind opening, they call them altering, and I don't think it's altering whatsoever, mind opening experiences, I saw more. I felt more. I said, wait a minute. What's this that the mushrooms are showing me? Let's say in Canada, you could get a lot from out west, from BC at the time, the blue and white ones, which some people I've talked with don't have a good time with them. Some people I've chatted with have a good time with them. When I did them, they helped me quite a bit. I wouldn't do them anymore. But at the time, in my 20s, they really helped open up a stubborn part of myself. So I allowed myself to see energy flowing in the universe. I allowed myself to hear colors, right? To see sound, to feel the stars moving, to see the energy behind my hands and other people's eyes. And mostly when I did them at the time and I looked at other people, I was horrified. I couldn't even look in a mirror in my own eyes, because it seemed to me I saw monsters, or I saw unhappy, unfriendly, sticky, heavy, morassful experiences of life that were not something that appeared to be what you wanted more of. Right? It seemed like you wanted less of it. You wanted to go away from it. I wanted to personally look at flowers, or to hear what the birds were saying, to go see what the trees were saying, to kind of look at life from a perspective that was beyond what was being taught to us as a social construct of perpetual ways to be alive that was acceptable, right? But again, nobody seemed happy. Everyone seemed foolish. All of the TV commercials that offered happiness obviously led to drunkenness, or being fat, or being stupid, or covering yourself up with makeup or cologne or a fancy hairdo. And I always look back too, and you always look back at your life 10 years previous. This was something else, and said, boy, was I stupid then. Boy, were the fashions ridiculous, right? Boy, was the way people saw life silly. And when in my 20s, I can only look back 20 years, but I also look back, beyond that, to the 40s and 50s of what was available through magazines and TV and, libraries at the time. But it always seemed like 10 years later, you look back, it was silly. 10 years later, look back, everyone was dumb. 10 years later, you look back and boy, we didn't know much of anything. And, that seemed to be a pattern. In my 30s, you look back at your 20s, and your 40s, you look back at your, your teens and your 20s and your 30s. And always it seemed like it was stupid before. So I'm going, well, what's different? You're going to continue with that pattern, you're just going to die an idiot, right? So you're in your 70s and you look back at your 60s and 50s and you say, I was stupid then, but maybe eventually. And eventually, there's no eventually. Right? If you live to 120, which is probably at the moment the maximum level of potential for a lifespan for humans, maybe. I've heard other things, but I would say that's the outside of it. You're going to look back and go, boy, was that stupid, in my opinion, from the potential of what was possible. If you just wanted to have a family, let's say, and make some children and get old and die, and that was going to relax you and keep you happy, but perhaps that's a possibility. But it always seemed to me that when you look around, like, what's the point? What are you doing? Why are we here? And when I did those entheogens, or when I did the psychedelics, I could see and feel that there was more than was being shared with me at the time. Right? They take their toll. Again, if you're ever going to do that journey, I highly recommend you talk to someone that's had the experience, or someone that loves you and cares for you, and maybe you want to do something of that nature with them. And I can't say that's a bad thing, but be sure that you're ready for something that's out of the box, beyond what you feel is possible, right? And what that showed me is, even now, if people have an imagination and you ask them, like, what are you looking for? They'll say maybe love, or they'll want more money, or they'll want to be healthy if they're not, or to be stronger, or to have more friends, whatever. And these potentials being offered through your imagination always seem to be very limited, right? What can you imagine? Oh, I can imagine myself stronger. I can imagine myself, in a warmer country. I can imagine myself with more cars, or happier, or better health, But what seemed to me at the time, and what the entheogen showed me, and what I see now through my own experiences over the years, is that what I think is missing, since this talk is about being, having phantom and phantom work, was your imagination, to put it bluntly. Like, what is our potential? When they say you use 8 or 9% of your brain or your energy system, what's going on with that other 90%? Right? If you do alternative studies of historical societies, let's say, if you look at the Toltecs, the Olmecs, the Egyptians, the bazillions of others that have probably been lost to history, the giants, the myths of magical experiences, whether it's little people or big people, or Irish people, or the shamans, or all the other alternative mythical stories that we all know about. It seemed to me our imagination in this modern so-called age was being severely truncated and limited down to get a better job, live a little longer, be a little healthier, take more vacations, save a little more money. But what were the energetic possibilities, costs, and resources, if you want to look at all of those, that were available to us? Energy in this day and age was moved towards money, whether it's digital, or cash, or loans, or credit cards, or gold, or silver, or beans, or shells. Really doesn't matter, right? It's an external source of barter or trade at best. And to give up what's inside you as your energetic gift, let's say, you're born, you only get so much, there's no more energy for you, you're born with what you have, and that's it. You can't put extra energy. You can trick yourself. You can do caffeine, or sugar, or drugs, or take, energy bull drinks, or whatever those silly things are. And maybe for a moment, you have an increased awareness, or an increased illusion of having more power or energy, but there's a cost always, right? Same with the entheogens, same with anything. Like, if you do it, you got to pay the price. You're just kind of using your own resources, or using your own resources at a little bit of a faster rate at the time, to give you an idea of what it's like. But really, what I found with, going back to the phantom imagination, all you could really do is regain your own resources, your own totality, your own way of being alive, by gathering what you've lost. The Toltecs look at it as a recapitulation, going over your life, seeing where you've given away your energy, seeing where you've taken on bad energy. And it's basically a cleaning process, right? Of going back to when you were small. I mean, when I walk around these days, the only people, so-called, that seem to recognize me for real are little babies, are little children. They're always looking over, going, what's going on over there? Because their eyes are still wide. Their energy is still attached to everything. They notice the wake that I noticed when I did entheogens, of energy moving by, You'll see a bird fly by, you'll see a flower, you'll see a bee, you'll see how they're all connected. And these hit you like winds that aren't winds, but they're more of an energetic interaction you have with your own energy that allows you to see that you're flowing in a sea of awareness, right? You're flowing in a sea of energy. You're not walking down the street, Joe Cool or Susie Sexy, and then looking for other people to look at you and say you're great or you're not, or it's okay. It's more like you're flowing in a sea of awareness, and like swimming in an ocean. If you're tired, you're going to sink. And if you're buoyant, which means you're light, right, and you have a lot of juice and you're happy, who knows where you're going to go? Who knows where that's going to take you? For me, I've really never settled down in my life in the last many, many years, 3-4 decades. I've been moving constantly because it seemed to me, as beings on this planet, that is what we're born to do. We're born to explore. We're born to move. We're born to find more, and I found as long as my energy is good, as long as I'm happy, as long as I keep moving, there's always more to find. There's always more to see. There's always more to explore. There's always more to figure out, even beyond maybe the bodies that we have, that, is it real? Are we really here? People talk about being stuck in a matrix or an illusion or a computer. Personally, I think it's all bullshit. I think, we all make our dream. And, if you say you're in a matrix, you're in a matrix. If you say you're in a suit as a man, you're in a suit as a man. Really, it comes down to what you put out is what you get back. And that's what I mean by the phantom, what's missing through our imagination and what we can imagine. If it's possible for you, and it's not so much you can sit there and do nothing, if you don't have any energy and say, I imagine, I have this, that, or the other thing, it's not going to work. Like, imagination is like a tool that has to be connected to your energy, that has to be connected to your actions, that has to be connected to your intuition, that has to be connected to the all of you to make this, I don't want to call it a machine, but we'll call it a skill or a resource we're all born with, activate and become something that is useful in your everyday life. Right? I know if I ask for something now and I walk down the street and I make sure that my intent is aligned with my purpose, is aligned with my energy, I'm going to at least see the potential for claiming that for myself, whether it's a job or something physical or a person to meet or an experience. If I ask for it, I will get it. But you really have to ask for it from an energetic standpoint, meaning you have to have some juice. Right? If you want to look at it as something that needs to be plugged in and you're energetic, if the generator's not working, you're not going to get nothing, right? The light's not coming on. But if you're healthy and you're happy and you're eating well and your love is working and your heart is generating and your eyes are open and your ears are open and all your senses are working very well, and your nose I would include in that, then you're gathering power for yourself, and then you can use that to create a new way to be alive. So in other words, when I was little and you're watching TV all the time like I used to, or you're watching cartoons like I used to, or you go to school and the movies at the time, there was before the internet, even you go see the books in the libraries, you're only in some ways going to be able to imagine what you think or you feel as a potential, right? If you have the potential to imagine wings, maybe you can imagine wings or a way to fly one day. Who knows? If you can imagine, having more energy or more love, and you can take your thought process out of it, you can see where that can grow into something beyond what is something you've already experienced. In other words, the phantom work that I'm talking about here, in short, is your imagination in this way, or your love, which could be connected to your imagination, in that anything you can think of is already your past. And if you, anything at all, whatever it is, if you can think about it, it's your past. If you can imagine it, it might be something that hasn't happened yet, because it's taking the pieces of your past and imagining putting them together and then throwing them out there and seeing what is possible. Like, let's say you want to fly. Maybe you won't get wings, but maybe something new. Maybe you'll float, you'll levitate. I don't know. I've had those experiences, levitating in my dreams. I've seen it in my experiences in life as well. I was always interested from a little boy in older histories or older mysteries or older UFOs, not because I had some grand design or grand desire to, let's say, go to the stars or to live with, ancient peoples, or to live in different ways of societal permutations. It was more like I knew what I had wasn't enough. I knew what I had felt small. I knew what I had felt tight and limiting and less than the potential of what was possible. So for me, I decided that I wanted to experience more, to grow further, and to go further. And that was a good start, right? You know, anybody that says, I've had a bad life, so I can't, blame, shame, and guilt, throw them away. I've talked about this before. We've done videos, or I've done videos with numerous people on it's all your fault, it's all your responsibility. It doesn't matter to me. You had a bad life, you were beaten, you were whipped, you were psychologically abused, you were physically abused. And I'm not saying it's all right, and I'm not saying it's great, and I'm not saying you should, and I'm not saying it was your fault when you were 3 or 4 or 5 or 8 and Big Tony hit you over the head with a bat, or when you were a little Sally and grandpa did something inappropriate. And I've heard all of these stories from lots of people, and that's not the point. Yes, they're horrible. Yes, they're bad. Yes, maybe there are children being abused, perhaps. I haven't seen any of the starving children in Africa other than on TV, and I don't believe anything anymore from any of those so-called programming, news, whatever, sharing what's possible or not, or what happened or what hasn't. Because to me, unless you were there watching it with your own eyes, and even then, it's all suspect. So what I'm really getting at is, so you had your experiences up until today. Maybe you're watching this and you're 20. Maybe you're watching this and you're 80. Doesn't really matter. And you had your childhood, and everyone's had their experiences of not such niceness in their childhood, of one kind or many. Even if you had great loving parents, which I had, they helped me in many ways, but they were psychologically abusive, and not because they were mean, but because they were very limited. But because their perspective on life was super narrow-minded, from whatever, whether they were orphans or poor, or from a war-torn part of the world, or they went through World War II and they lost all their siblings, whatever. I've heard all the stories, but that limited them to what they thought was possible. And maybe that's why all of those experiences happened to them. So what I'm getting at is, you've had your experiences. Now, what do you do? Okay. You were abused as a child. Sure. Great. Not so that it was great, but you sit here today, you're going, okay, this happened. What am I going to do about it? And again, I'm not saying it's anybody's fault what happened then, but it is your fault. It is your responsibility where you go from here, where you grow from today, what you do with yourself. I've done some videos with a few other people about getting out of the cave, escaping, being free. Freedom seems like the topic of topics right now, because people are feeling less and less and less free. And in my opinion, the only way out of this nonsense is through your imagination, is through your power, is through understanding who, what, and where you really came from, who you are, what your potential is, how you can govern yourself. And that simply means, take control of your own resources, your own life, your own ways to be alive. Saving monetary resources is not going to help you when your health is gone. It's not going to help you when the walls close in. It's not going to change anything. If you're up in a mountain and you've been walking for 4 days and you're starving or you're thirsty, you're not going to be looking in your pocket for a $5 bill and thinking that's going to get you anywhere. Right? You're going to go, when someone hands you an apple or a flask of water, you're going to go, oh my goodness, this is what I need. Same with your energy. When you're out there dreaming, when you're out there seeing, when you're out there looking to be in a different way, in a new way of life, what you're going to look for is you and your own resources, the phantom parts of you that are missing. We'll talk about hauntings in another time. We'll go into mind. We'll talk about dreaming and how to escape. These are other videos I'm going to do soon enough. But in this one, I just wanted to put down for all of my listeners, everyone out there, we've gotten over 3,300 subscribers. So I want to thank you very much for coming and being here and seeing here. And I'm very interested in your comments, your suggestions, your participations of all kinds, what you think we should talk about next. But what I'm sitting here basically to say is, today, what's missing, the phantom, the thing to work with, the thing to begin with, is your imagination, in my opinion. Look back over your entire life, see yourself back to the beginning, reimagine yourself when you were little. If you don't remember your childhood, that's a great place to start. A lot of people forget because they move away from it so far that they can't even imagine what it was like anymore. But probably if you spend some time with yourself, cleaning your energy, going over your bad experiences, allowing them to inform you, and then releasing them, however you need to do that for yourself, not holding on to them, not blaming, and shaming, saying, oh my goodness, I had a bad experience, so I can't do anything about it, because that's what life's going to be about. But saying, I had this experience, what am I going to do about it today? Seeing how that informs your imagination, seeing where that allows you to grasp more of what you need to do next. Even if you only know where you're moving from, that's a great way to go. You have a direction. We have, Freedom's Calling You to Life's Lost Purpose. I have the 9 video series I've done with Cambell from Autodidactic. I do In Love Unlimited. There's a whole bunch of people that do face-to-face counseling, coaching, sharing, whatever. There's a bazillion videos out there. There's a bazillion books out there. I can point out some if someone's interested. We can do work together. Perhaps if someone's interested, the video series is there if someone's interested. And if not, just sitting and doing it alone, I think can work as well, because why not? You probably have all the resources you need to move to where you need to go. I don't think anyone was born as a victim. I don't think anyone is born such that they don't have the resources to become free if they really want to be. Not easy, not even by a stretch of the imagination. Could be the hardest thing, probably the hardest thing you're ever going to do. But what else are you going to do, in my opinion? To look at what's missing, to see what phantoms are haunting you, to see what shadows are shadowing you, and to take all of that and to look at them not as bad things, but as informers, as something that's trying to tell you where to go next. All right. I love you very much. Thank you for being here. I appreciate your support and your time. The New Now, please like and subscribe, share, comment, all those lovely things. Phantom Work, this is number 1. We're going to do more. Thanks again. Talk to you very soon. I love you all very much. Cheers.
Can't make me lie to my heart. No one tells me where I should start. Freedom first is what I say. Nothing now gonna get in my way.